I'll never forget the smell of grilled ribs mixed with gasoline. That's when it hit me. My family didn't really see me as one of them. Just a footnote. I'm Hank, 33 now. 10 years ago, if you told me I'd own 3 properties, drive a paid off truck, and run a landscaping company with 20 employees, I would have laughed. Not because I didn't dream big, I did, but because growing up, I was repeatedly told I was a disappointment, loudly, sometimes in silence, which can be worse than words. My younger brother Brandon was the golden child. If there was a trophy on the fridge, it was his. Birthdays with fancy cakes? His. A new BMW at 17 for earning a B+ average? That was him too. Meanwhile, I got a firm handshake at graduation and a so what now from Dad. I wasn't dumb, I just didn't fit their expectations. I liked building things with my hands, fixing lawnmowers, cutting grass, painting, work they saw as blue collar or beneath them. I moved out at 19 and took a job with Reggie, an older landscaper in town. He was gruff, smoked too much, but he taught me everything: how to bid jobs, spot soil problems, and work with picky clients. I saved every penny and now ate spaghetti almost every night, worked weekends. Nobody noticed or asked. The only time my family reached out was when Brandon needed help moving or Dad needed a sprinkler fixed. By 24, I bought my first fixer-upper, did the work myself, flipped it, and used the profit to buy a duplex. One side rented, the other mine. I kept quiet. My family didn't see success, just blue-collar labor. At least he's not in jail, was the unspoken compliment. Brandon went to Yale, then Stanford, then a startup that lost millions but called itself disruptive. He got Dad's business card at 21, with instructions to eventually take over the firm. I just nodded. I was used to it. Everything changed at a family barbecue my parents throw every June. Big event, caterer, tents, hundreds of guests. I'd skipped the past 2 years, making excuses about work. But Grandpa Frank, my mom's dad, old school and one of the few who ever said he was proud of me, guilted me into going. He still calls me Hank the Tank. I showed up around noon with a 6-pack of craft beer for Dad. Nobody noticed. Brandon's BMW sat on the lawn, music blaring. I found Grandpa by the grill. We joked, he asked about work, and I mentioned a commercial landscaping contract. His eyebrows lifted. That's no small job. Proud of you, Tank. That was the last kind thing anyone said to me that day. I floated around, nodding at cousins, avoiding conversation. I didn't want to talk about work or property. Family only notices bragging or trust funds. Then I overheard a cousin ask casually if my company trucks were tied to a new project. I confirmed, almost offhand. Closed last month. 3rd property, actually. Brandon appeared behind me, smirking, holding a glass of wine. You own 3 properties? He said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I kept calm. A couple years now. He barked a laugh. Hank the lawn guy. Guess even a broken clock is right twice a day. I smiled tightly. I just built my own clock. His eyes narrowed. So now you're a real estate mogul? 3 properties and a few weed whackers make you Donald Trump? I stayed calm. It's working for me. Mom intervened, trying to defuse it, but Brandon ignored her. You act so smug like you're better than us because you left early. Think your houses and truck mean you've made it? I said nothing about superiority, only that I stopped waiting for validation. He stepped closer. You think Dad's proud of you? I didn't answer. He threw his drink into the grass, glass shattering. Mom gasped, a few relatives froze, a child started crying. Mom started crying too. Brandon ignored her, focused on me. I didn't move. Then Grandpa stepped in. Leaning on his cane, he surveyed Brandon and me, letting silence settle. Finally, in a slow, deliberate voice, Boy, if Hank's the disappointment, then what does that make you? The room went still. Brandon froze. Mom's mouth opened. Grandpa gave me a nod, then walked back to the grill. The tension broke quietly. Brandon stormed off. Mom followed, still clutching her wine glass, glancing at me like I'd orchestrated it. The party resumed. Music got louder, laughter forced. Dad stood by the beer cooler, detached as always. I stayed another hour, chatting with Grandpa about tomato plants. Before leaving, he handed me a napkin with a name and number, a friend managing commercial rentals. Tell him I sent you, he said. That night, Brandon posted a cryptic Instagram story. Funny how snakes can wear flannel. I ignored it. Next morning, a call came from Sandra at Glendu Bank. She asked about a line of credit application in my name. I hadn't applied. Everything matched. My name, address, EIN. My gut sank. I called my accountant. No other suspicious filings. Then I remembered the barbecue. I'd left my work phone on the patio for a few minutes. Notes app open, passcode simple. Brandon knew it. I couldn't prove it, but I suspected. I didn't confront him, thinking it a petty stunt. That fall, I applied for a university contract, landscaping 2 dorms and the surrounding quad. Weeks of preparation, competitive bidding. Then a call from Greg, the project coordinator. One of the admin team found complaints about my company. If you thought I'd give you a heads up before you jump to conclusions. Complaints? I asked. Yeah, Greg said. Reviews, emails, even a Better Business Bureau entry. Claims your crew's damaged property, didn't show up on time, things like that. I went cold. That's not true, I said. I didn't think so either, Greg replied, but we have to verify it. I hung up and started digging. The reviews were recent, mostly anonymous Google entries. One even mentioned a property I'd never touched. The BBB complaint was barely coherent, but it included my business name, EIN, and a fake customer story that was believable enough to sting. For 3 days, I submitted takedowns, verified with clients, and sent out character references. I still lost the contract. They went with a bigger firm. That one hit hard. I didn't tell anyone, not even Grandpa. I just focused on work, keeping my head down, adding another layer to the invisible wall between me and my family. But the seed was planted. Brandon wasn't just insecure. He was willing to sabotage me. And I wasn't going to stay on defense forever. Around Christmas, the family held a smaller get-together, immediate family, and a few close friends. Mom insisted I come. It'll mean so much to your brother, she said. Let's just all be together. No drama. I agreed, but told her I wouldn't stay long. I arrived with cookies and a polite smile. Brandon opened the door and said nothing, just stared at me like I'd been delivered by mistake. Dad was by the fireplace with a scotch, Mom fussing over appetizers. The room felt tight, like the air itself was bracing for conflict. Dinner was strained but civil. Brandon bragged about a consulting gig. Mom kept asking about my dating life. I kept answers short. I didn't mention work, properties, or my truck parked nearby. Then Brandon's fiancée, Sierra, spoke up. She was new, polite, and honest. I heard you're doing a few buildings, Hank. That's awesome. Brandon said you're really successful with your landscaping. I think it's great when people build things from the ground up. Brandon glared like she'd crossed a line. I just mean, it's nice that both of you are doing well. She added quickly. Silence. Mom changed the subject. Dad cleared his throat. Brandon excused himself a few minutes later. After dessert, I grabbed my coat. Brandon followed me to the porch. You think you're so clever? He said quietly. I think I'm tired, I replied. You're trying to embarrass me. You think people will suddenly forget what a joke I've been just because Sierra noticed my work? You think that because you scrape together rental houses and mow lawns, you're finally equal? No, I said. I don't think we're equal. I think I surpassed you years ago. You were just too busy looking in the mirror to notice. He went red, jaw tight. I walked to my truck. That night, I realized it wasn't over. Brandon wasn't just upset I'd built something. He was furious I did it without him. And that's when he did something that made Mom cry, Dad choose sides, and Grandpa speak 5 unforgettable words. I didn't hear from Brandon for weeks, and I was relieved. I threw myself into work. Winter was slow, but I planned the next phase for my commercial plaza. A bakery, a chiropractor, and a small design agency signed on. I kept my excitement private. Success is quiet when you're used to being underestimated. In February, I pulled into the lot. Gravel, fencing, but taking shape. My phone rang, unknown number. Mr. Dawson? A woman said. Officer Keller with the City Business Compliance Division. We need to discuss one of your job sites, 1225 Maple Avenue. Can you come to City Hall this afternoon? My stomach twisted. Sure. What's this about? I asked. There's an anonymous report, possible code violations, unsafe equipment storage, potential zoning issues. Just need to verify a few things. I sat in my truck, trying to breathe. I ran a tight ship, but I knew who it was. Brandon. I didn't have proof, but the signature was unmistakable, vague, enough to cause friction, enough to slow me down. At City Hall, I showed all permits, zoning approvals, and safety reports. I stayed calm. The officer softened and said, "This looks solid, Mr. Dawson. We'll likely close the complaint without further follow-up." But the damage was done. My contractor pulled out. The bakery asked for a delay clause. The chiropractor wanted another walkthrough. The designer ghosted. I felt it slipping. I barely slept, replaying decisions, questioning if I'd overreached, if my family had been right, if I wasn't meant to win. Walking through Home Depot one night, my knees buckled. I caught myself on a shelf, just breathing. It wasn't the money, it was the why. The fact that it came from inside the house, from a brother who couldn't stomach my success. Shame crept in, not for what I'd done, but for what I hadn't. Every time I stayed quiet, I made myself small enough to be stepped on. I nearly called Grandpa. I hung up. Next morning, he appeared in his old Ford, parked beside my truck, 2 coffees in hand, crooked smile intact. "I figured you might be too proud to call," he said. We stood watching a backhoe. He didn't ask, just waited. I told him everything: the loan application, fake reviews, BBB complaint, anonymous city report, lost tenants, ghosted calls, everything Brandon had done, and everything I hadn't done to stop it. Grandpa nodded. "You know what your grandmother used to say?" I shook my head. "There's a special kind of fool that mistakes silence for weakness. You're not a fool, Hank. You're patient. But even patience has a price if you don't know when to cash it in." "Want my advice?" he added. "Stop playing chess with a pigeon." I laughed. That laugh did more than coffee. The next 2 days, I cleaned the site, tightened bolts, organized records, resubmitted permits, wrote letters to tenants, scheduled walkthroughs. I wasn't just defending myself. I was building armor, cameras, digital cleanup, new software authentication, phone security. I wouldn't just survive. I'd be prepared. A week later, the city dismissed the complaint. Tenants confirmed. Momentum returned. But I noticed something. A black Lexus idling across the street. I didn't wave. I knew. Brandon. Something shifted that day. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready to stop reacting, to stop defending, to stop letting people who never built anything tell me my worth. I wasn't just going to recover. I was going to win, not out of spite, but because every nail, every contract, every seed was earned. I didn't know what Brandon would do next, but I had a feeling. And when it came, it would be the last straw. That moment started with an invitation and a note in Brandon's handwriting. The envelope was thick cream, sealed with wax. My name on the front in gold cursive, Mr. Hank Dawson. Return address, Brandon's downtown condo. I left it unopened a day and a half, curious. Would it be a standard invite, a phony olive branch, or another jab? I broke the seal on Wednesday morning. Inside, a folded invitation wrapped in navy ribbon. Elegant script: "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Brandon Dawson and Sierra Langston, Saturday, September 10th. The Langston Estate, Riverbend Hills." Sierra came from old money. Wineries, estates, stylists, summer homes. But the real poison. Handwritten at the bottom, Brandon's unmistakable cursive. "Hoping this event can help us all move forward. Dress code is formal. Please leave work boots at home this time. B." I stared at it, not angry or shocked, just done. This would never end. Not until I ended it. Up until now, I'd played fair. I hadn't humiliated Brandon, told anyone about the fake complaints, or retaliated. If you want, just kept working harder. But that wasn't enough. Now, Brandon was about to marry into a family that saw him as the polished prodigy, the young executive with charm and legacy, while I, in his eyes, was the dropout with dirt under my nails and grass stains on my soul. I made a decision. I would reveal who Brandon really was, not through gossip, but with clear, undeniable facts. And I would do it at his own wedding. It would be precise, controlled, and impactful. First, I needed help. I called Alex, who had worked at Brandon's failed startup 2 years ago as a back-end developer. Smart, mild-mannered, but he and Brandon had a fallout over unpaid equity and ignored emails. I remembered Alex saying at a friend's barbecue, Brandon never paid his debts. He just buried them under new logos. Alex picked up immediately. "Hey, Hank, you still have that thumb drive?" I asked. "The one with the email dumps?" "Yep." "Planning to sue him?" "No," I said. "Just want people to see who they're marrying." Alex laughed. "Finally, someone asks me that." He sent it that afternoon. Compressed, password-protected files with emails, PDFs, screenshots. Brandon bragging about inflating data, withholding pay, and mocking Sierra's father. Gold. I didn't want it to come from me directly. That would look vindictive. I called Emily, my ex, who worked in PR, crisis management, and corporate reputation spinning. She knew how to expose someone professionally without fingerprints. After I explained everything, the email dump, the wedding, Brandon's lies, Emily was quiet, then said, "Okay, here's what we do. We spent 3 hours selecting the most undeniable evidence. Time-stamped emails, bounced check PDFs, Slack messages about renting friends and suits for meetings with Sierra's parents, and spreadsheets of manipulated investment numbers. We built a concise, professional dossier. Next, we created a dummy Gmail account under the name Event Guest 101 and timed the email. Emily had a contact in the Langston wedding planning team, confirming the rehearsal dinner, Friday at 6 p.m. Dozens of key guests, including Sierra's father, mother, and a state judge aunt. The email would arrive at 5:50 p.m., just before the toast. Phase 2 was preparing for fallout. I gathered proof of Brandon's sabotage, fake city complaints, IP addresses of review attacks, and the timeline of every interference. I wasn't pressing charges yet, but I wanted the evidence ready. Then I did what I should have months ago. I talked to my parents. Over lunch on the back patio, I explained it all. Fake complaints, sabotage, BBB lies, review bombing. Mom poured iced tea. Dad grilled chicken. Mom gasped, "Hank, why?" "Because I built something without him," I said. "Because I stopped being the failure. Because it made him feel small." I handed them a folder, clean, tabbed, organized, every email and digital trace. They didn't defend him. I left without saying what would happen next. They both knew something was coming. Less than 20 minutes after the email went out, Grandpa called, "Boy, you better get down here. The dam just broke." I drove to the Langston estate. Inside, the rehearsal dinner was chaos. Long tables, scattered plates, a frozen pianist, arguing guests. Brandon was red-faced, clutching printed emails. Sierra confronted him. "So you mocked my dad, inflated numbers, lied about equity in your startup." "They're taken out of context," he snapped. "It's Hank." "I know it's Hank," I said, stepping forward. Guests recoiled. Brandon's eyes locked on me. "You think this is clever?" he spat. "I didn't crash anything," I said calmly. "I was invited. Remember the cream envelope, gold lettering, something about mud on boots?" Sierra's father asked Brandon directly about the manipulation. Brandon hesitated. Sierra held the folder as if it burned her hands. "I defended you to my family," she said. "This is who you are." Brandon lunged, not to punch, but to shove. I barely moved. "You spent your life stepping on people who wouldn't fight back, but some of us build. We grind. We don't fake it. And one day, we stop staying quiet. You ruined everything." Security arrived. I didn't resist. One cousin confirmed I was invited, and they backed off. I walked out, letting the fire burn. The fallout was swift. Within 24 hours, the Langstons canceled the wedding. Sierra posted a polite but definitive breakup. Brandon tried to spin it as sabotage, but Emily had provided verification, IP logs, timelines, everything. The damage was bulletproof. Sierra's father withdrew the family investment, triggering a breach clause. Brandon owed money he didn't have. Dad didn't step in. Weeks later, he called, "I was wrong about you, Hank." Mom called, crying, realizing she didn't know her son. She sent photos from my childhood, ones where I was front and center. I saved them for later. Grandpa visited the job site, folding chair and lemon drops in hand. After 10 minutes of watching, he said, "Damn, good revenge. Clean, surgical. You get that from your grandmother." That spring, I signed 2 commercial leases, filled the plaza, hired 5 more workers, and bought a new truck. My accountant said I'd cleared my first $1 million in revenue. No one handed it to me. I built it. Brandon? Last I heard, he was consulting small time, still chasing big talk without substance. He messaged once, "You think you won?" I didn't reply. I knew I had. Not because he lost, but because I stopped living in someone else's shadow. I wasn't the disappointment. I was the blueprint. And the next time someone calls me the other Dawson brother, I'll just smile. If you want,